Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Sean Fine is my name, CEO of the Irish Bioenergy Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you this morning to this webinar. This morning's webinar is number 46 in our bioenergy webinar series, and our topic this morning is a report from or update from the Midlands Bioenergy Development Project, and we're also launching the energy use and bioenergy feedstock reports. So thank you again for joining, and we hope that you enjoyed this morning's webinar. Before we kick off with the specific topics, just a very brief introduction to the Irish Bioenergy Association for some of the new attendees that we have joining us this morning. So we were established as an organisation in 1999. We're the representative body for the sector. So our work covers the areas of biomass, biogas, biomethane, biofuels, biochar, and then we have a growing wood fuel membership, and also some members are involved in the energy crop sector. Generally, our work is in the area of policy lobbying and advocacy, and our membership is broad and diverse. So if there are any individuals or companies on this morning who would like to become a member of the association, please feel free to get in touch, and we're happy to discuss the membership options available. We also roll out a number of research and development projects, including the Wood Fuel Quality Assurance Scheme, which is a certification scheme for wood fuel suppliers. There's a EIP, European Innovation Partnership funded Small Biogas Demonstration Programme. We have an Interreg program called Cascade. It's in the biochar area. And then there is this Midlands Bioenergy Development Project as well. And further information is available on our website for anyone that would like to find out more about what we do. Just for information, we also have a series of fact sheets covering all the bioenergy sectors, and we're hoping to expand this series over the coming years. Just a reminder as well that all our webinars are available on the IrBEA YouTube channel and also on the website. And to date, we have completed 45. This is number 46. And as you can see, there's a wide, diverse range of topics covered so far, and they're all available to go back and view, depending on your area of interest and requirement for knowledge in particular areas. So this morning's webinar, I will give a short overview of the project. I will then hand over to Dr. Eugene Hendrick, who will give an update on the Midlands Bioenergy Feedstock Analysis Report, and then we will present the findings from the Midlands Energy Demand Analysis Report. As I said, these reports will be published in the next week and available on our website, and we will also be issuing a press release signifying the official launch of the reports and publication of them. We will then have a panel discussion with Q&A, and if any of you have any questions as we're going through the reports, please post them in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will endeavour to answer as many of your questions as possible. We had scheduled an hour and a half for this webinar. Depending on the levels of questions and interaction, we may finish earlier, or we may run until 11, depending on the level of engagement and interaction. So just to introduce our speakers, so Dr. Eugene Hendrick is the chair of the Solid Biomass Group within the Irish Bioenergy Association, and Eugene co-authored the Feedstock Analysis Report, and Eugene will give an overview of that report, including his co-authors. And we're also joined this morning by Noel Gavigan, who's our technical executive within the Irish Bioenergy Association. Noel will give his perspectives on the reports at the end of the presentation. We are already planning for webinar number 47. Full details will be published through our social media channels in the coming weeks. We will be returning to our Wednesday morning slot. From here on, again, we just changed to a Friday for this particular one, and we were doing the 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. slot. And the next topic will be confirmed, as I said, in the coming weeks. If you're interested in presenting on a topic about a project, about a service that you provide, or indeed a product that you have, please get in touch, and we're happy to discuss the potential for hosting or running a webinar where you would present what your area of interest. Okay, moving on. So the Midlands Bioenergy Development Project was funded under the National Just Transition Programme. These few slides are just an overview and update on the programme and the project and what it has achieved to date, and we're coming to the closing stages of this project at this stage, and give you an update. So it was funded under the National Just Transition fund, as I said. We're very grateful to the Department of Environment, Climate Action and Communications for their support and for awarding us this project. We have been running for quite a time at this stage with this project over the last 2.5 years. It has provided and focused on providing information, training and technical advice and guidance to various different bioenergy businesses and stakeholders within the Midlands National Just Transition Funded region. That region covers the areas of East Galway, North Tipperary, Kildare, Offaly, Laois, Roscommon, Longford and Westmeath. It's quite specific in terms of what areas it covers. This project was in Priority 1, Employment and Enterprise Support, and its focus was on farmers, on foresters and entrepreneurs and startup SME businesses in the Midlands region. We also had a lot of interaction with existing businesses who were fossil fuel businesses who wanted to diversify their businesses and become renewable businesses or add a renewable element to their business, and we worked with some of those as well during the course of the project. That's just a summary of the region, the counties across the Midlands area that we worked in, and there were 4 main areas where the project had objectives to achieve, and they were in the areas of innovation. So this project is innovative as it assists with the development of new green businesses in the region and encourages employment opportunities. Economic sustainability assists companies seeking to establish or diversify into sustainable enterprises. There was a social aspect associated with it in that it was about trying to help and sustain employment in the region, maintain the fabric of rural communities in the Midlands, but also trying to encourage and assist the transition from peat to power generation associated with peat to power generation and thermal generation associated with renewable fuels, particularly bio-based and bioenergy fuels. There was also a strong environmental focus with the project, and that focus was around ensuring that at all times we were very conscious of the sustainability criteria set out in the Renewable Energy Directive, and that environmental protection and compliance with that was at the forefront. And really, this project delivered on 3 main priority areas. Priority areas set out under the Just Transition Fund, employment and enterprise supports. Our objective was to assist 12 new businesses, startup businesses in the region. We have surpassed that. Some of them were existing businesses, some of them are new businesses. Information and training supports. So there's a large element of the program around delivering training, and I have some examples of the training provided in the next slide or two. And then community transition support. So engaging with the various different communities. We did a series of workshops across the region where we engaged with and gave the opportunity for members of the community to engage as they understand what bioenergy is, but also the opportunities that it presents in potential diversification from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. So those workshops that we did across the region were also all very important in terms of helping and assisting with that community transition support. So what were the main items, what we had to deliver through this project and the main KPIs that we have achieved? So the analysis of the bioenergy feedstocks was a significant piece of work, as well as the energy demand reports. The energy demand report was completed by Fichtner Consultants, and that has been completed for quite a while and has been launched now. And the bioenergy feedstock report is just recently completed and been launched as well at this moment in time. These reports were the evidence base for the businesses to prove that there are feedstocks available that businesses can process to produce bioenergy, and that there are also significant energy demands within the region. And the energy demand report specifically analyzes where those energy demands are and the different types of energy demands they are and what sectors they're in. A key element of this work and the project as well was to identify what are the needs of the establishing businesses in the region, and we generally found that the needs fell into 3 main categories. It was about knowledge, information and skills, and there were many secondary needs as well, and those secondary needs generally were around recognition for the sector, for the bioenergy sector, in both policy and in various different implementation plans which exist. and a number of other items which were quite specific to certain businesses, depending on what the businesses were. So the information campaign to highlight the potential of the region from an employment perspective, from a bioenergy perspective, has been quite successful. I've just an outline of what those roughly were in the next slide. The expression of interest, we received quite a significant amount. There are still businesses we were working with in terms of expressions of interest. Now, I just have to say at this point, we did have an issue with our expression of interest system. And as a result, there were some people that expressed interest who, for some reason or another, we didn't receive the expression of interest, and they've contacted us since. So if there are any people on the call who have put in expressions of interest and who we haven't been in touch with, can you please come back to us and let us know, as there are a couple of companies in that scenario due to an unforeseen issue with our expression of interest form. The training and mentoring then has been provided, and Noel Gavigan, my colleague, has provided a lot of that to particularly a lot of the wood fuel businesses that have been established in the Midlands region, but also we've done that through workshops and through specific training events. So that's just a broad outline of the high level deliverables within the project. And at this stage, we've achieved pretty much all of what was set out to achieve. And the next stage now is just to finalize our project and to convey and disseminate the learnings and the findings. I thought it was important just to focus on some of the needs which arose during the course of our work. And these broadly break down as follows: to raise awareness of bioenergy at all levels. And that's in line with the work of the association anyways. So that's important. The bioenergy resource availability and mobilization. A lot of people weren't aware or aren't aware of the significant amount of bioenergy resource available in the Midlands region. And a key need is just how do we mobilize that and how do we get that moving? And it links back to policy, it links back to practical and technical areas. There was a need identified of where the energy demands are. So the main, I suppose, regional towns in the counties are where the significant energy demands exist. So that's all documented within the report. And as I said earlier, there was a lot of need for knowledge, skills, and information, and we provided that as necessary. There was also specific training identified as required. Particularly, there was a specific biogas training required, so we sent people on biogas training. There was also a specific training required for biomass installers and designers, so we had a specific training associated with that. And there were a number of other information events which would also account for specific training events, including a dedicated bioenergy course which we rolled out in conjunction with Gurteen College in Tipperary. One of the main aspects associated with the needs identified was dealing with regulatory changes, particularly on the wood fuel side, where the solid fuel regulation has been introduced. And aligned with this was the need for upskilling the sector around the achievement of specific moisture contents as outlined in the solid fuel regulations. And we did carry out a number of events associated with wood fuel moisture and wood fuel drying. I mentioned about the biomass installers and designers training that was identified by some of the businesses on the energy demand side who were wondering, are there installers, are there designers, and where are they? So it's linked back to the IrBEA registers we have, but also there was a specific training course rolled out to cover these particular aspects. And then communication was a particular need of the positive role of the sector, the bioenergy sector, as a renewable energy resource. And that communication extended to a number of webinars which we've had about the project, but also we had a very successful launch back at the start of the project, and that also linked in with the workshops which we did back in November and December last year, where we did a workshop in each of the particular counties about bioenergy generally, and communicated the positive role of the sector as a bioenergy source of renewable energy. And then just very I probably have mentioned all of these so far, so I won't dwell on it. I think I have mentioned them all. Just some of the highlights in terms of the events, the launch, the information events, the training program, the woodfield drying, the designers course, the technical reports which we're launching. There was a lot of, there was so many companies approached seeking various types of mentoring, media coverage, and broad engagement from stakeholders. So that concludes my brief introduction as to what the project has achieved so far or has been working on. I'm now going to hand over to Eugene Hendrick, who's going to take you through his work around the identification of the feedstock supply in the Midlands region. So Eugene, are you available to come on screen there and turn on your video and sound, and we can see you? Can we hear you?
Yep.
Yes. So will I move on, Eugene? Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sean, and thanks to IrBEA for this opportunity to present to you the results of the work that's been done on the potential bioenergy feedstock supply in the Midlands region from 2022 to 2040. Just a few words about myself, just for your information, those who don't know me. From about 2000, I was the director of the National Council for Forest Research and Development, which were mainly around funding of forest research in Ireland and related areas. And then from 2010, I was in the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine. I headed up a division called Forest Sector Development. And part of that work, we did work on the national the All Ireland Roundwood Production Forecast, which includes an element of forest-based biomass and energy assortments. And I was also involved in the whole area of the production forecasting for roundwood in the All Ireland Roundwood Production Forecast, which comes out every 5 years. So I have a lot of background in relation to forecasting and the whole forest-based biomass energy space. Okay, Sean, thanks. Next slide. First, so look, I'm going to take you down to a series of slides. As Sean has said already, the report is coming out in the next few days. It's a detailed report. It's broken down into each county in the region. There's estimates there in relation to all of the sectors all of the streams I'll go through. So it'll be all in there. But I want to give you an overview of what's in it. I also, before I start, I want to say, want to thank my co-authors, who are Henry Phillips, who did most of the work on the forest-based biomass side. Henry is well known in the forest sector around the All Ireland Roundwood Production Forecasting System, and also Tim Hickey, who also was working on particularly on the silage area and so on, the biogas and biomethane side. Just again, as sort of a framing remark, I think it's well worth to bear in mind that at the moment, despite a lot of progress in terms of rollout of renewables, we're still roughly speaking, 83% of our energy or our energy use comes from fossil-based sources, and an awful lot of that 83% of our fossil-based sources is imported. So we're highly dependent on imported fossil fuels, and of our heat, the heat sector, which is about a third of our total energy use, only 7%, just over 7% of that comes from renewable sources. So there are massive challenges going out to 2030 and beyond in terms of decarbonizing our economy. So this report and the bioenergy space is around that and what contribution it can make. Okay, so the first slide is basically what is bioenergy. If you just go back up there a second, Sean, please.
Yeah.
The previous slide. Okay, so bioenergy is a form of renewable. It's generated when biomass is combusted. Biomass fuels come from organic materials such as residues, purpose-grown crops, and organic waste from our homes, farms, and businesses. Okay, Sean, next slide. So I think it's important as well to say that what is is it sustainable? Well, just this slide shows you the comparison between fossil fuel on the left and biomass carbon and bioenergy in general. Fossil fuels, as that it comes from reservoirs of fossil fuel, gas, oil, whatever, and it's combusted, goes into the atmosphere, and it stays in the atmosphere, is taken back into forest uptake and so on. But it's a one-way street, basically, from the reservoir to the atmosphere. And of course, we all know the consequences of that. So sustainable bioenergy, in contrast, sustainable bioenergy circles carbon from crops and forest to the atmosphere and back to the land and forest. So, as I said, unlike fossil fuels, which is a one-way system of release of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, you can see that graphic there, it shows it. So it's biomass, if it's in context of sustainable development and sustainable forest management, is a renewable energy and ideally suited to address the challenges going ahead. It's not the only one, of course, but it's an important one. So just to go back to what I was saying there, we're highly dependent on imported energy and fossil-based materials. In 2021, we imported 77% of energy supply. The figure I quoted was higher because we have the gas, indigenous gas production has fallen off, and that's the reason that the import level has increased. So as fossil fuel prices spike, well, fossil fuel prices have come back since that statement, but they're still higher than they were before 2022. And there's an increasing focus on the need to secure higher levels of indigenous sources of energy across all of the streams. So wind, solar, bioenergy, hydro, and geothermal. Next slide. So this report focuses on the one I'm going to talk about, the bioenergy supply side, on materials arising locally in the Midlands region, either from existing resources such as forestry or an expansion in energy crops and recovery of residues and waste streams, and from greatly expanded use of anaerobic digestion particularly in the use of grass silage to produce biogas and biomethane. Next slide. So what did we do? So we looked at all of the streams that would be feasible to produce bioenergy materials. So we broke it down into two main sectors: solid biomass, which is forest-based biomass, stuff directly coming out of the forest, sawmilling residues, bioenergy crops. In bioenergy crops, our focus was on a willow, a short rotation coppice, and then we've waste wood from biomass from arboriculture and related sources. Just in relation to the whole spectrum of solid biomass, all of the materials that we looked at were in the context of sustainable harvest, reforestation in the case of forest, continuation for bioenergy crops, coppicing over several cycles, and for sawmilling residues, these are materials that arise from processing of roundwood into solid wood products. And you have a waste stream there. I better call it it's better to call it co-products, because they have a high value, relatively high value, either for making panel products or for pellet production, whatever the case may be. So we also looked at from arboriculture related sources, that would be mainly from clearances, from maintenance of roadways and so on and so forth. In terms of the soft biomass, which we refer to as agricultural slurries and manures, I'll talk about how we got to the numbers later on. Mushroom and horticulture and other solid organic waste, with green waste, food waste and compost bin waste, and food and agricultural production waste as well, and other waste streams. We had grass and silage, we had straw and other fibrous materials, and we had municipal and industrial sludges. So we tried to cover nearly everything. Sometimes it wasn't that easy to get the data, but we did get it eventually, and we analysed it quite carefully. I want to just acknowledge, by the way, in terms of particularly in relation to the soft biomass, the help that we got from a number of agencies and regional or universities around the country. Particularly, I want to acknowledge the work, the cooperation we got from Teagasc in relation to some of the areas. Okay, next slide, please. So, forest-based biomass, solid biomass, and then forest-based biomass. So, just to say a bit about this, how we do it. It was based on the technique, the systems and techniques that we use in relation to the national roundwood production forecast, and it was downscaled to the region. that Sean has shown you to the counties and North Tipperary and East Galway. We downscaled to that. So we estimate using updated estimates of thinning levels and some recovery of what we call final harvesting residues, specified biomass harvesting. Specified biomass harvesting is a fully sustainable way to recover final harvest residues. These residues arise from tops and branches that are left after what we call clear felling, or they can arise in continuous cover forest systems as well. So basically what is done there is at final felling, you organize your SPH, what we call an assortment, or the tops and the branches, neatly on the site. These are left to let all the needles and or leaves, whatever the case may be, fall off, because you don't want to remove those. They're part of the capital, the nutrient capital on the site, and they're not suitable. They degrade any material that's for combustion. You don't want those needles or leaves included in the assortment because they create all sorts of problems. So you need to leave them on the site for two good reasons: sustainability of the site and also for your quality of your combustion material. So just in very high level numbers, we estimate the forest-based biomass potentially available within the region is around 550,000 green tonnes at present, around 2022, 23, 24, and that has the potential to rise to 820,000 green tonnes by 2040. So it's about a 50% potential increase in materials available, green tonnes available from the forest-based biomass, or for the total solid-based area, and that gives it's equivalent to 1,100, depending on the moisture content. But we did various we looked at the moisture content at combustion for various streams, and we estimated it was around about the contribution would be around about 1,100 gigawatt hours in 2022. Rising to about 1,700 gigawatt hours by 2040. So look, in a nutshell, it shows that there is potential, substantial potential, to increase the level of biomass, solid biomass in the region using sustainable, emphasize sustainable harvesting levels. Next slide, please. And just to say to you that all of these numbers are in, as I said, at county level in the full report. So we also looked at bioenergy crops. Now there isn't at the moment there's no willow scheme, but we assume that there would be a reintroduction of the scheme to supplement the whole area of in terms of the production going forward of solid biomass. So we assume the planting begins from 2022. Well, we're in 2024 now, but that was when we did the work. So we would plateau the production, as you see there, in 2043, and we assume that it remained at that level, assuming no further planting. So we estimate around an annual yield of 20 green tonnes per hectare, and the potential rises to 435 gigawatt hours by 2040 and 560 by 2043. Next slide. We also looked, as I said, at woody biomass from arboriculture and related sources. Again, sustainable production. We're not talking here about removing hedgerows or anything like that at all. It's just basically what material would arise. It's a very difficult area to quantify. We did it based on one particular county where we had reasonably good data, and we extrapolated that to the other counties within the region. So the potential annual, if I go back, the estimated potential annual woody biomass recovery was about 100,000 green tonnes per year, and the estimated energy content, as we estimated 50% moisture content is delivered, that converts, roughly speaking, to about 235 gigawatt hours per year. Next slide. Thanks. So this just summarizes the solid biomass summary. So there's 4 principal sources of solid biomass available in the region. They would be forest-based biomass, sawmill residues, new willow crops, and arboriculture and tree clearance residues. Now, just important to say, in relation to the forest-based biomass and sawmill residues, they all arise from forests that are already in the ground. There's no assumption made in the forecast about new forests being planted. So that's gives you good confidence that it's potentially available. Depends on market forces, of course, but that's what's there in the ground. The one we did make projections, as I said, about the new willow crops, and we made assumptions about the level of establishment of willow that would occur. And then the arboriculture and tree clearance residues, well, they provide, I talked about the amounts that they will provide. So look, and as I said already, it goes to 820,000 green tons by 2020, or sorry, by 2040. And I've talked about the level of energy that converts out into. So a lot of the increase comes from, sorry, Sean, could you go back to the previous one? Yeah, so a lot of the supplies you can see there, the bottom one is the actual forest-based biomass, and the next one up, the green color, if that's what you see on your screen, is from the sawmill residues, and they're predominantly the predominant level or predominant source of supply. Now, if you look out to the right-hand side for the forest-based biomass, this is showing a decline, a decline over the period. That's down to the lower levels of afforestation and the shifting of the population, the tree resource, the forest resource into older age classes. But that's can be supplemented by. These are, just want to say, these are these are conservative estimates of what can be produced. If there's a higher level of demand, well, then you can sweat the resource more and you can get more material out. And I wanted to say there in relation to that it's essential that in relation to getting this material out from the forest, that there is a robust market for across all levels, all uses of forest-based biomass, be it residential, commercial, or industrial. So, for example, the SSRH, it needs to continue. It needs to be expanded. It needs to be better, in my view, promoted. You know, so in other words, you need a strong market to get this material. It's out there. It's available. But you need a market to get more material out, or even to get the material that's there into the energy sector, because there are other demands for some of this material. Like, for example, sawmill residues, there are other demands out there, you know, at the moment, and there will be in the future probably. So, you know, it's important to have a really good, strong market for this material. Next slide. So on the soft biomass, we had Tim Hickey did a lot of this work. So we showed that cattle slurry is by far the largest component of animal manures, as you all know. It's about 10 million tons arising on an annual basis. Pig slurry arises in quantity also. We estimated the energy content. Of course, we know that slurries have a low energy content and are generally co-digested with silage and food waste. And of course, most of the energy comes from the gas comes from the silage and the food waste side. It was modest amounts of poultry litter, and we estimated in relation to the energy content of that material and pig slurry as well. So we also looked at mushroom, horticulture, and organic waste. So there's only a minor amount there. You know, it's about 16,000 tons per year with an associated energy content of about 17 gigawatt hours. So green waste, food waste, and compost bin waste and other waste streams. So it is about 230,000 tons of black bin and 33,000 tons of green waste rise in the region every year. And then we estimated the energy content of those, as you can see on the slide. So silage for anaerobic digestion, we showed a steep increase in that based on policy announcements and so on and so forth. So the potential amount of grass silage arising in the region increased from about 70,000 kilotons, 70,000 tons in 2023 to over 500,000 kilotons by the end of the project, or the 2040 period, and it remains at that level over the succeeding decade. So the area in moving into grass silage increases from 1,300 in 2022 to well over 10,000 hectares. Very large increase. Sean can speak more about that he's more knowledgeable on that than I am, and Noel. So then we estimated the biomethane. We looked at the biomethane energy content, not the biogas energy content. And for strong fibrous material, there's a lot of material arises, but a lot of that may not become available. But we estimated what, in terms of reincorporation, et cetera, and then doing a policy and whatever the policy mix is. I know there's issues around that at the moment. And we estimated the energy content of that from direct combustion at about 730 gigawatt hours. So we also looked at municipal sludge. We looked at what was sent off site, and we estimated on a dry tons of dry solids, and the estimated energy content was about 56 gigawatt hours per year from anaerobic digestion going into that side. And you can see there the summary of the different streams, and you might notice that this is a much there's not as many jags, or it's a more there's less ups and downs in this, because it's basically more a projection of what's going to be available. Whereas if you go back to the forest-based sector, that's based on, it's trees that are in the ground, and the numbers, or the annual numbers, reflect sort of they reflect past planting programs, et cetera, but these are more projections of what's available. And you can see there the total amounts, gone from 820,000 tons in 2023 and from to over 1.3 million tons by 2040. So the summary soft biomass potentially available and the associated energy content, we summarise that there. And so that's basically it. We'd be happy to take any questions in more detail as we in the Q&A. We looked at existing wood fuel businesses. This was part of our remit as well in the Midlands Development region. Next slide. So there's quite a number. There was 56 businesses in total. So we looked at their level of energy green tons intake. So you can see there the annual intake was around about 488,000. 500,000, half a million green tons per annum, and it's broken down into imported. There is about 43,000 tons, and then the total was 631,000 tons. So there's quite a number of actual businesses in the region, but there is scope, as Sean was saying, to increase that number, and because of the increase in the supply. So the total annual biomass use there, I've broken it down to the size classification in terms of the size of the businesses, in terms of how much was used. And you can see that Eden Dairy Power is a very large, obviously, intake of material there. And then the other businesses, a smaller number. And there's a lot of smaller businesses. 37 of the businesses were taken in less than 1,000 green tons per year. So there's, micro scale, mainly in the firewood sector. There's also other businesses, larger businesses, taking in material for wood pellet production. So listen, that's it. A very quick snapshot through it. Sorry for rushing a bit, but that's But the report will be coming out in the next week, I understand, Sean, and you can read it all there. But I'd be glad to take any questions.
Okay, we come back to the questions, Eugene. There's a few maybe items we might further explore in the panel and Q&A. If anyone has any specific questions, please put them into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. I'm now going to take you through the work that Ficner did in terms of their high-level energy demand analysis. While the feedstock report has been finalized in recent weeks and months, the Ficner report was done quite a while back at the earlier stages of the project. However, we decided to hold back in launching it to launch the two reports together. But as the businesses have approached us in terms of support and whatever, we have been highlighting to them the main findings within the energy demand report as evidence for the establishment of those businesses. So I'd like to acknowledge and thank Ficner for their contribution. Okay, so again, this report was carried out under the auspices of the project, and it was commissioned by ourselves and the Irish Bioenergy Association. And really it was to provide evidence to inform the project and support the potential bioenergy businesses in the region. I'm not going to go through this, it's just the wider region again. So why did we do an energy demand analysis? And apologies again, this slide is a bit wordy, but just to summarize, well, it was really to, first of all, highlight the opportunities that exist for energy-related businesses and the development of bioenergy-based supply chains. To give give a bit of context to the opportunity and the significance of the sector, to identify the region, the main areas where energy demand is in the region, to give evidence then for the establishment of businesses to displace fossil fuels, and to really highlight the advantages that bioenergy plays and can play in the displacement of fossil fuels. So what did they look at? How broadly did they look at, and what are these were there data gaps? And there were data gaps identified, and we can go through some of those, and they're outlined within the report as well. So in summary, the SEI broadly in their heat study have identified that between 7 and 17% of all heat demand nationally will be supplied by bioenergy by 2030, and with a similar portion in 2050. So to be very specific, then the total energy demand in the study area, being the Midlands Just Transition catchment area, was 5204 gigawatt hours. So, and that broke down into the various different sectors, shows that 63% of the energy demand is in the residential sector in heating our homes. 16% is in commercial. So commercial would be defined as your nursing homes, your leisure centres, your hotels, all those types of businesses. 11 would be industrial, so that would be your processing industries, your large factories, those bigger industrial facilities. And then there was 10% of our energy demand is in the public sector. So there are public sector buildings, state buildings, and buildings that house certain departments, government departments, and local authorities, etc. So that just is a summary of the breakdown in terms of the percentages across the region. So as set out in the study, targeting 50% of the total energy demand for the conversion from fossil fuels in the region would yield a market of about 781 gigawatt hours. So the 15% is from if we took the higher percentage of the SEI heat study, and if, for example, there's an example there of what the volume of wood chip would be required in order to satisfy that energy demand. So as you can see there, if you look at what Eugene has highlighted from the resource potential perspective, this volume perspective is significantly lower compared to the potential which exists within the resource in the Midlands region. Obviously, the key example or key area is it's about fossil fuel displacement, and that fossil fuel displacement could be around, in this case, biomethane as exampled here, through the injection point at Cush, County Kildare, or indeed through use of displacement of solid fuels with renewable fuels for domestic households. So it's all about how we can encourage businesses to move away and households and users to move away from fossil fuels to use renewable fuels. So at a high level, the conclusions were that, and I've highlighted the various different breakdown of the sectors, and these are all detailed in the report. The target, if we target a 15% conversion, that shows you the energy that's required. Quite surprisingly, and as a result of the quite a sizable amount of bogland and peatland in the Midlands region, a significant portion of domestic central heating or domestic heating is fueled by peat currently, and that possibly will change in the near future as we go along, as people diversify into more renewable options. But it's just a significant segment of the market from a domestic heating perspective. The gas consumption in the region then is split. You can see there is the gas network runs through the Midlands region, and that's in a slide later. And you can see a breakdown there in the region of the gas consumption from the residential sector, but also the non-residential sector. So as we can see there, this was dominated by County Kildare, where you have a more densely populated urban or residential network of estates and housing. And that was the most dominant and most dense populated area of the catchment that was covered. The report also goes into detail about licensed sites in terms of it outlines where the licensed EPA licensed sites are in the intensive agricultural sectors, with 1 poultry site in East Galway and 34 pig sites distributed across the region. The reason we highlighted these was because they are an opportunity for displacement of fossil fuels again, to the use of biomass potentially, and support potentially through the SSRH. There's also an analysis of the distribution of licensed vehicles in the area. So there's 490,000 licensed vehicles in 2020 in the just transition catchment area, and of these 76% are made up of private cars, within tractors and goods vehicles making up the remainder. So again, the reason why we highlighted this was because if there were any opportunities or potential for bio-liquid based businesses, then there's obviously an opportunity there's a lot of vehicles in the area, but also there's an opportunity exists here for potential utilizing of biomethane as a transport fuel in the future. So the report offers a number of recommendations as well. And the recommendations in this particular area were that IrBEA will continue to advocate for potential businesses in the region, that there was that there should be published energy use data for the SEI large energy network and SME programs. That was quite one of the data gaps which exist. There should be published user data regarding them available. The annual environmental report of the EPA of energy use should be improved. I think gaps were highlighted as well in the data around this, and they're highlighted within the report. Solid bioenergy for residential heating needs is an immediate alternative to solid fuels. It can directly displace, so that peat-based fuel can be directly replaced with wood fuel, WFQA certified, quality assured sustainable wood fuel that's at a moisture content that complies with solid fuel regulations. And then solid bioenergy in the form of biomass, as well as has been highlighted also through the work of Eugene, can immediately displace some of the fossil heating oil used in the commercial industrial heating sectors at the moment. District heating as a public sector and local authority opportunity in the region needs to be considered. And it was felt that there needs to be clarification in the future as soon as possible from gas networks around the potential location of centralised grid injection points within the Midlands region, as this would help and assist potential developers to figure out where would the injection points potentially be located compared to where their facilities could potentially be located. And that's even more relevant now in the context of the renewable biomethane strategy, which has recently been published and has been rolled out or and the sector has been encouraged to develop. And then on an ongoing rolling basis, IrGrid and ESB network could review if potential stakeholders are aware of the correct means they need to engage with those organizations. We felt that there was a lot of feedback given that there was a lot of misinformation about the role of IrGrid and ESB networks, and also how people could actually engage with them if they have potential projects, say biogas projects, or indeed biomass CHP projects that they would like to get off the ground, and potentially are interested in the business of producing renewable electricity. And then the final recommendation was just that there would be more, that there needs to be more market supports, more market development supports for gaseous bioenergies. That's biogas and biomethane. And by market development support, we mean ongoing support, ongoing operational support, not capital support has been currently proposed through the biomethane strategy, but ongoing operational support to reduce the risk associated and give a guarantee in terms of the gas price, renewable gas price, and encourage development of the sector. So I'm not going to go through the summary I've gone through previously, and then there's a series now in the next, just quickly run through them. So that was the catchment that the Pickner looked at, which was the area of the National Just Transition Region. That's just a a pie chart showing the heat demand, which I've outlined across the different sectors. This here shows the EPA license sites in the catchment area. So the EPA license sites, as I mentioned, were both pig and poultry sites generally. And again, these are an opportunity for bioenergy, biomass-based diversification or diversification of their fuel usage. And in fact, some of them already have moved towards biomass. I'm aware of some projects in the Midlands in the poultry and pig sector who are in the SRH program. This shows the residential heating map of the thermal energy demands. And as you can see, the thermal energy demands are predominantly located. So the darker the color, the orangey reddy color, shows the county town kind of locations or the regional town locations. So, you know, Boyle, Roscommon Town, I'd say Tuam, probably somewhere in Lochray or over there, Ballinasloe, you know, so all the Tullamore, Burr, Edenderry, Portlaoise, and even Thurles and going on towards South Tipperary, and in the Kildare ones as well. So it shows you that the as we know, the large regional towns are there where the urban population is more densely located, and as a result, it shows there the location of the heat demand from a residential perspective. If you overlay then this on the commercial heat demand, again, it's a similar picture, except it might be slightly broader. But again, it's predominantly located on the outskirts or within the catchment of the same towns. And then if you look at it from the public perspective, the public heating, so these are the locations of public buildings and public infrastructure. You can see there again, predominantly the same orange markings signifying where the large public buildings are located in the catchment area. And then industrial, so again, it's just a map of the industrial heating area. And this one here shows the total then, what the total demands are. So again, it combines all together and where that demand is. This is the gas network, obviously. So as you can see, the gas network runs right through the center of the catchment area. So from Ballinasloe on the west side of it over to Kilcock infield on the eastern edge of the just transition area, as far south as Tullamore and also Portlaoise, and as far north as Ballymahan and Mullingar. So it run right through the middle of the catchment area, which presents an opportunity potential for biomethane, biogas projects within the catchment area. These are the intensive agricultural sites where they're located. They are more concentrated on the eastern side of the catchment. But again, these are the pig sites and the poultry sites, and with the study area outlined. And again, this is just another infographic around the pig and the processors and the density from so you can see where the large pig producers are, which not outside of the region predominantly, Tipperary, Cork and Cavan being the largest, but you can see there a strong concentration in Longford, Westmeath and Offaly of the intensive agricultural sectors. Again, that concludes the charts. It concludes the formal presentations. So if you have any questions, as I said, please feel free to put them into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We have a couple of questions coming in there, so if I could ask Noel and Eugene maybe turn on their cameras. And before we go to the questions, I'll stop sharing. Maybe could I ask Noel to give your commentary on the two reports, and indeed you were intrinsically involved in the Midlands Bioenergy Development Project in itself, so maybe give your own feedback and thoughts on the project and the work being done through the two reports.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks, Eugene. Yeah, I think just to bring it back to exactly what the project was about, to just transition. I mean, effectively, we've had in the Midlands and grew up in the Midlands and still live there. We had a large industry involved in peat, and the idea of just transition was to look at what replacement industries could be put in place not necessarily in the energy side, but we concentrated in this obviously on renewable energy. So not just replacing the jobs and the social side of it, but also the fact that the Midlands have traditionally been an energy producer for the country, both in terms of electrical power and in terms of heating. So it was, it was a natural fit into that space. So the figures that have come out from these reports are very encouraging in terms of the volume of material that has already been used. So we've again almost 500,000 green tons of material of wood fuels being produced per year, or sorry, of wood green material available for fuel. And there is a bit of concentration there in that in Laois and Offaly. But having said that, it is dispersed. There's a lot of smaller suppliers dispersed throughout that region. And it lends itself to definitely developing that further. We have people already in these industries, and we obviously know them through our own work in IrBEA. But this project has definitely highlighted quite a number more. And their input into the energy sector is very valued, and it is significant potential to increase. I suppose the big number that jumps out from the heating demands is obviously the residential, at over nearly 2/3 of heating within the region is residential. And it is already dominated from the use of peat. Turf is a very popular product right throughout the Midlands counties. And there's all of these houses have the infrastructure for utilizing a solid fuel. So they have sheds for storing turf, they have appliances, stoves and ranges and range cookers, whatever else that are, and heating systems that are based on a solid fuel, that are based around turf. And that for 700 gigawatt hours, it's a significant amount of material that they use. And it lends itself to being quite readily converted over to wood fuels. And, so we can decarbonize an entire section there relatively easily. There's a cost factor, obviously, to take into consideration. But the fact that we have the raw material there, the fact that we have the demand there, it's definitely something that we can look at developing further. And those companies that we've identified in the Midlands that are already in that space, and the potential for them to expand and to grow and take on new people is quite significant to meet that demand. So I think that's one of the things that we've anecdotally people might have said that 3 or 4 years ago, but now these reports have really pointed out the potentials in this. We've seen obviously then again the fact that SEI and will be backed up by the International Energy Agency report that SEI are saying between 7 and 17% of heat or of energy should come from biomass. The International Energy Agency are saying by 2050 we need 20%. So again, the region fits itself in quite naturally into supplying raw material. Now, predominantly, we're going to see most of that coming from the forestry sector, and the reports have clearly outlined that. And I think the more encouragement there is there for the forestry sector and to expand the area we have under forestry, the better. But there's also potential there for energy crops, be it willow or other crops that would have a shorter cycle. Short rotation forestry, for example, can also be explored. So there is a significant potential there to expand the production if needs be. And these reports do back that up quite significantly. So I think that's I suppose my summary. I suppose the key points I would see coming from it, the job potential that is coming out of this is again significant. The resources are there, the ability is there, and the demands for the fuels are there as well. I suppose one other thing we see when you look at the maps in terms of the dispersal, obviously the residential is most are concentrated. All sectors are concentrated in the towns in the built-up regions, but the residential is quite dispersed also in the outside of the urban areas, and they would obviously be the potential there to use solid fuels would be significant. In the more urban regions where we're looking at gas, it could be biomethane, but obviously also district heating, which has got significant potential. We don't see much district heating in Ireland, or very little, but yet we've seen district heating systems all over Europe working very successfully everywhere from the Mediterranean right up to the Baltic. And they allow themselves, if you're looking at decarbonising a town, we see systems there now where people are looking at retrofitting houses, and the uptake is relatively considerably slower than we'd need to be if we're going to meet our 2030 targets and beyond. But with district heating, the potential is there to not only to decarbonize by using a renewable heating source for district heating, but we can do that conversion relatively quickly. Rather than having to convert 50 houses on the street, we can run a district heating system down the street for a lot less capital cost, and it can be done a lot more conveniently. So there is potential there to develop that further. So I think one thing that comes out of this report is there is a lot of potential there to be considered. And the questions now will be, how do we move forward from here and how do we develop further?
Okay, thanks, Noel, for your summary. Just a couple of questions there. First one for you, Eugene. Just green tons, just what do we define as green tons? And can you just explain how you get from green tons, to, dried material?
Okay, so basically we try to express the energy content relative to a moisture content, because we all know the energy you get out of wood is highly dependent on the moisture content. So we have to refer to, and it's in the report, it makes assumptions on the level, the moisture content. So basically a green ton, typically we're talking about spruce coming out of the forest, it's about 60% moisture content. By the time you get it into the facility, it can be 50%, or you can dry it down to, for residential combustion, it can be 25%. But green tons normally refers to what you get out of the forest. So it's usually, by the time it comes in as delivered, it's usually around about 50%, can be down to 45%. And we've done some sensitivity analysis around those in the report.
And Noel, just to follow on that then, so can you just explain how, some businesses require different moisture contents, and then maybe the difference in, say, domestic fuels versus industrial fuels from a moisture content perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a very good point. So just to follow up on what Eugene was saying, he identified a little under, I think it was 488,000 tons of green tons. So the fact that matches up quite closely to the 15% displacement figure of 260,000 tons, I think, it just shows that there's quite a bit of balance between the raw material available and what we'd look at for 15% displacement. But effectively, okay, you're taking out at 60% moisture content. A lot of industry, larger boilers will take wetter material, maybe at 40%, and even 35, 40, 45, depending on the size of those boiler systems. So typically, say one that's able to heat a small town will take material at maybe 40, 45%. The drier it is, the better in many cases, for efficiency and for ease of use. Now, there's a cost implication in that as well. So often you see larger systems will push for wetter material because it's cheaper, and they're built around that. In domestic settings, the current requirement is 25% for firewood. We see wood pellets and wood briquettes will always be under 10% because they need to be to when they're made. But the requirement for moisture content is going to be under 20% for firewood, going by next September. And the reason for reducing the moisture content requirement, there was none a couple of years ago, but the level of we've a massive reduction in carbon emissions by using firewood compared to fossil fuels. But there is a level of particulates, smoke effectively, that is produced from burning wetter materials. So the drier that material is, the cleaner the combustion is, the more efficient it is. And it's overall, we see different standards across Europe for this, but ultimately we will be pushing for all of those solid fuels to be under 20%. So you good clean combustion.
And just
you'll see.
Noel,
Can I just add?
No, Eugene, come in. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Just on the particulates, just to make an important point, I think is for the higher moisture content material, like that you'd have in a large scale, combustion plant or whatever the case may be. The particulates are, also cater for there, because you can there's all systems that you can reduce the levels of particulates. So those systems are very, very advanced now, and the level of particulates are very, very, very small, because there's EU law and there's EU regulation and directive. So it depends on the plant and the scale. But obviously, everything we want to do is to reduce the level of particulates, as Noel has said. But just to say that for the higher moisture content materials, the plants that are available now have extremely low levels of particulate emissions because the systems built into them in there. And it makes sense to burn as much as the carbon as you possibly can in terms of energy recovery.
So there's various different regulations at European level, depending on and directives, depending on the size and scale of the equipment.
Exactly. You have the, you know, there's several directives depending on the size of
Another
the.
question there. Sorry, Noel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just the larger the combustion facility, you know, the much you've got much more efficiency in terms of combustion at a. So if something is burning, you know, a couple of tons a day, it's going to be able to cater for wetter material, and it's well able to combust that fully.
Can you please explain the supply chain demographics of bioenergy in the Midlands region and the cost analysis of plantation and energy recovery from the biomass produced indigenously? So I'm not sure what the person that's asking this question means about demographics, but I suppose it's just, could you give an update, Noel, on the supply chain in the region and Eugene as well, maybe Eugene from the resource point of view, how we mobilize the biomass resource and the bioenergy resource, and Noel maybe from the perspective of the actual equipment and companies involved in that. So Noel, Eugene from the resource perspective maybe first.
Yeah, well, I can speak to the forest sector. There's a number of specialized contractors now who have the technology and the know-how and markets to harvest what we call, you know, whole trees, basically. So instead of just taking out a thinning that you normally would for, say, producing, you know, steak wood or whatever the case may be, you can take out a full tree sustainably again, let the needles fall off, whatever the case may be, leave it in the forest for a period of time. And you can get a much higher level of recovery from that. And it is cost effective because obviously the more material you can take out on a per hectare basis, the more efficient and the more cost effective it is. But that's all can be done sustainably. And that's the way I see it going in the future. We'll be taking higher levels of material from the forest. But just to make the point, this is just for energy purposes. You leave back, for the vast majority of forests, most of the income and most of the rationale for growing the forest is to produce sawlog size material, because that's, you know, much more higher return to the owner. But there are systems in place for first thinnings in particular, where you can take out a higher proportion of the material, and that technology is well developed, it's well understood, and it's been practiced by a number of contractors. And the same applies, as I said already, about the specified biomass harvesting, which is basically residues that are left on site, carefully arranged and so on for harvest later on. So the technologies that are there, they're cost effective because the people that do it are able to sell the material at a price that, you know, the market can, you know, they can get the return from it.
Okay, and Noel, do you want to focus on that second part and the cost analysis of the plantation energy recovery from the biomass produced indigenous? So maybe explain the cycle, forest cycle and thinnings and that, and how that, from a cost perspective, how that contributes. Or
yeah, so effectively, I suppose, first of all, on the tinning side of it, there's obviously a cycle of forestry management. So you plant quite densely. Eugene will have a lot more expertise in this himself, but I'll do my best to explain it. But you're planting quite dense to get stems to grow good and straight. And then you're taking out different tinning stages, so some of the weaker trees or maybe for access roads into it. And then the stronger trees are allowed to develop into much for structural timber. So effectively, all those thinnings are byproduct from the normal forest sector production. So you have all those trees that are just unsuitable, they're either too small or crooked or too branchy, too much knots in it, that are not suitable. So just different terms used for that. I suppose pulpwood would probably be the most common one. But brash is another effective material coming out. So I think that there's quite a lot of that material coming out. The more forestry we have, the more raw materials we're producing for sustainable buildings. So wood, we'd be very supportive of as much wood construction as possible, and we should be promoting that as much as possible. There will always be byproduct. So the more sustainable materials we're producing for construction, the more there will also be available for energy. So as a byproduct from it.
That leads to the next question there, now then, or maybe hand over to Eugene for this. It says just the word sustainable was mentioned, so can we just outline around the sustainability of the bioenergy sector from the perspective of that? So this is just a question, and I'm summarizing the question. So no, Eugene, do you want to comment on that and maybe just comment on the
so absolutely, thanks. The most important thing about sustainability from a forest perspective, of course, is that you reforest the area after you take the forest down. I referred earlier on to that slide, the circular slide. So basically, what is essential there is that you reforest it, but also in terms of, as I referred earlier, sustainable biomass harvesting or specified biomass harvesting. That basically the sustainability piece there is that you only take out the woody biomass, you leave all the nutrients on the site, so that makes the site gives it. You keep the nutrient capital on the site so that the forest productivity doesn't decrease. There's a lot of guidelines around harvesting that the Forest Service have in place in terms of water quality, keepbacks from water courses, retention of woody debris on the site. You don't take off everything. You leave a certain proportion of dead biomass on the site as habitat for invertebrates and for fauna, etc., etc. So that's also part of it. And in the whole forest growing space, there's also the area you leave areas that are unplanted. There's a certain requirement in afforestation to do that, and similarly in reforestation, when you take down the crop and you regenerate it, you leave a certain proportion of the areas that are not planted. So there's a whole lot of guidance and regulation around sustainability that are really, really important. One important point I wanted to make was, and when Noel touched on it, is in relation to the assortments that you take out. The end game in most forest growth is to get to the sawlog size, as I referred to earlier on. But on the way to getting there, you take out thinnings, and in not a case, not always, but in other cases. So basically, what does thinning do? As Noel said, it makes the remaining trees grow faster and bigger, of course, in the end game. So basically, the key point here is that by taking out thinnings and taking an energy assortment out at an early stage, that you accelerate the growth of the remaining forest and you bring forward, sawlog size material quicker on a particular forest. So that's really important because the whole, as we know, we want to keep carbon out of the atmosphere. And one of the best ways of doing that is through establishing new forests, taking it out, but also when you harvest it, putting into more longer term materials like structural timber. But there's always, as again Noel says, there's always a certain element of the material that is not suitable for use in that category. So it's, instead of being, some people think we're burning sawlog size material, or it's never the case. It's always going into that category. Why? Because it's the price paying potential for sawlog size material and for that kind of construction timber is about 4 to 5, 6 times higher than you would get for an energy assortment. So it's actually fully compatible. The two are fully compatible. The energy side and the sawlog side are fully compatible. And that's a key sustainability point. And that's also laid out in the Renewable Energy Directive, RED 2 and RED 3, the more recent one, RED 3, which speaks about the cascade use of wood. So the end game is to put it, as I said, put it into solid wood as much as possible. But it does recognize in RED 3, the Renewable Energy, the latest version, that there is you can also use the wood in terms of energy. You can either use it directly or you can use it after end of life recovery of the energy from solid wood products and so on when you're recycling them. So that's, in a nutshell, sustainability.
To clarify, Eugene, your figures are purely the figures for the energy piece. You don't get into the piece around the availability from the perspective of construction and sawlog. And that's all. That's covered by COFOR's separate analysis.
Yeah. Like, it's very important, because we do segregate out the energy. Piece, and there's also a lot more going into the sawlog and into the board mills, and those they're kind of ring fenced in the forecasting system, and they're similarly in this piece of work.
Okay. There's a couple of questions on biogas, biomethane here. So I'll take the first one, Noel. I'll give you the second one. The first one is, what's the panel's perspectives on the biomethane strategy? So that has recently been launched. So I suppose from an IrBEA perspective, the strategy is a first step, but really is only a very basic first step, in that our members who are predominantly feedstock suppliers, technology providers, developers, and those involved in the generation of biogas, biomethane, are very clearly seeking or asking for ongoing support, similar to the way that renewable electricity is supported through the RES scheme, the solar sector through the also the RES scheme, and indeed biomass, solid biomass through the SSRH program. So that's our position really, while we welcome the strategy as a first step, that the industry is looking for ongoing support. However, the government has opted for capital support, and it remains to be seen whether that will actually result in any facilities being built or not, given that there's a huge gap between the price of fossil gas and the cost associated with the production of biogas, renewable gas, biomethane as well. So that's just a very high level perspective. We're not here this morning to necessarily talk directly about the strategy, but that's just an answer on the question. And Noel, the second question is, what do you see as the opportunity and potential for biomethane stroke biogas in the Midlands region? So Noel, do you want to comment on that?
So yeah, look, we definitely have a lot of raw material available for it. There is obviously waste materials, resources with brown bin material, which everybody has a domestic setting is producing brown bin material. We all have food waste. That's nutrients that have effectively been gone through the whole agricultural sector, where we produce food. The nutrients have gone in there for our own nutrition, so to speak. But the food is wasted, so they can be recycled back out onto farmland as well. By just putting into a biogas plant, you're recovering the energy, and then you're recovering the nutrients by spreading the digestate afterwards, the raw material that you left it afterwards, back onto land. So it is definitely something that fits in very centrally into a circular economy. If we want to have sustainable food, we have to consider, well, what are we going to do with all the raw material that hasn't been used, or the food waste that comes out of it. It's all part of the same conversation. There is obviously crop material as well that can be produced, whether it's grass silage or other high DMD value materials that can go into a digester. They come at a higher cost because they have to be produced, and that needs to be reflective in the gas price. That is because there is it will the price of biomethane up by having that. But if we want to produce, again, sufficient quantities for supporting our gas grid, or whether it's for electricity production, or indeed one of the better uses, believe it or not, is heavy goods vehicles, because you can't electrify those very easily. And definitely we've seen quite a lot of good examples across Europe in various countries where they're using it successfully in larger vehicles to displace diesel. So I think it's got a strong place there. The question comes down to, for some reason here in Ireland, we have one of the lowest levels of digesters per population than most of Europe. And something is a little bit hasn't been put in place as yet to get that across that line. There is a question: capital supports will only go so much, because unlike a wind turbine or a solar panel, this isn't about capital cost. And similar to the biomass, there's a high capital cost, but there's also a running cost. We have to put feedstock into these things, we have to run the plants. So a capital cost will only go so far. And I think the critical thing on this is going to be how much, if you're someone looking to develop a biogas plant, all of your sums are based on how much are we getting for the gas, and does it cover the cost of feedstock? Does it cover the cost of capital and everything else in between? So I think that they're the critical points, really.
Okay, thanks, Noel, for that. We're not too far off the end. We'll be finishing up very shortly. If there are any other final questions, please submit them to the Q&A tab. Question here, Noel. There was the question is that we mentioned earlier about the solid fuel regulations being a driver of inquiries around the mentoring program. The question is, can you just explain that? So can you explain maybe how your work with businesses in the Midlands and the Woodfield perspective is helping them in achievement of the regulation requirements, and maybe about the
yes.
That's the question.
So
I'm summarizing, but that's the broad question.
Yeah, so effectively, all producers of solid biomass fuels going to domestic setting this have to produce it to under this 25%, which we fully encourage, and we actually called for regulation like that for the market a number of years ago, and it has been put in place. So effectively, for a lot of say firewood producers, they may not have been set up for producing material that was seasoned to that level. It's not that difficult to get it under 25%. Indeed, it's a very technically impossible to get it under 20 in Irish conditions with natural seasoning. You just have to have certain techniques in doing so. So what we done during the course of this program is both on an individual basis, I have visited quite a large number of producers across the Midlands region, and indeed in other parts of the country as well, and outlined all the different techniques that people are using. Whether it's sometimes there are people who are using kilns, but we would promote air drying as much as possible. Even with a kiln, air drying works best because you get rid of most of your moisture that way. We also ran a series of events. Over the course of the excuse me, over the course of this year and last year on correct drying techniques. So we visited a number of operators, some in the Midlands, some outside the Midlands. We brought some people from Midland areas to if the expertise was outside the area, we brought them to those places. And we looked at the various techniques and how you can get your going from wet pulp out of green tons at 60% moisture content, that comes in a truck. How do you process that into firewood that's under 25% and then under 20%? So we looked at the various techniques on that, whether it's how you stack it, how you're getting plenty of air through it to get it dried out, the time requirement on that, and whether you're using covers or not. And then once you get it down to a certain level, it's usually two-stage process. You try and get it down to maybe 30% outside on the stack, and then you're processing it into firewood, and in a loose format, you're getting it down the rest of the way. At that point, some people are using kilns, others are using polytunnels or open sheds and various techniques in terms of how to bring it down the rest of the way. So there were very well attended events, and we are still receiving calls about that. We will most likely look at if we can continue those sort of events next year, because definitely there was a lot of interest in it, and we found it's very encouraging when you bring people out on a site a visit like that, and you go to their place a couple of months later and you see they're implementing the lessons that they've learned.
And just specifically, just to follow on from that, for the benefit of attendees, so there was a workshop organised on polytunnel drying that took place in County Meath, because Sherlogs have a lot of expertise in that particular area, and there were many attendees from the Midlands region. There was one in Kildare, which was in the catchment area or very close to the catchment area, on kiln drying, and then there was a final scheduled workshop on air drying in Cotter Brothers Firewood down in Limerick, as we just brought attendees from the Midlands area down there, and indeed showcased the potential that are the techniques involved in air drying. We have two final questions. The first one, maybe both of you could address. The question of cost associated with the various different fuel options, and particularly biomass. Have cost considerations been incorporated or included within the reports, or what's the commentary on that? So who wants to take that? I know from your perspective, Eugene, cost hasn't been included, and indeed the energy demand report doesn't include cost. The focus of this work was not about cost, it was about the identification of the resource and the use. So have you any further comment on that, Eugene?
Really, basically the market dictates the price, so biomass is able to compete with most other fuels, actually, if it's done in the right way. Again, go back to the supply chain, and particularly around the types of recovery that you do. So look, biomass is competitive in price. It's a sustainable fuel, but it is competitive. It can compete with most fossil fuels, actually, in terms of delivered energy cost.
Okay, Noel, Eugene has probably answered the question. I think the question was just his cost covered in the reports, but do you want to maybe separate the Midlands project? I know you've been working on a piece of work around levelized cost. Do you want to just give a brief update on that, and maybe focus on the various cost points of the different types of fuels which we're talking about here?
Yeah, so I suppose effectively, now there's a different types of fuel, but say a wood chip, for example, if you're looking at an industrial or commercial setting, there's two factors in the cost. Number one is the capital cost. So these systems to put in place a bit of wood chip or a wood pellet boiler with a fuel store are more expensive than your oil boiler or your gas boiler with a similar, obviously an oil tank for your gas, for your oil. So there is a capital cost implication. Secondly, then the fuel itself. Now, generally, we're seeing that wood chip and wood pellet are very competitive with kerosene. And we've seen, over the last 15 years, we've seen it's very much been able to undercut, especially the wood chip side of it, to undercut the costs of kerosene. So the cost balance overall is very good, but you have to go into the investment at the start. So the SSRH scheme, which is there to encourage that, has been very helpful, and long may it continue. I suppose one thing we've seen over the last number of years was a capital system put in, a capital grant aid put in by SEI, as it was at the time, back in the late noughties, mid to late noughties, and it was just capital. What happened there was a number of installations went in, but when the price of oil plummeted then in 2008 and plummeted again then in 2014-15, we found those facilities that had a chip boiler were switched back to oil because it was cheaper. If they're a commercial industrial operation, they're looking at their costs. So you just have to, so the SRH ensures that that's happened. So it's basically you get no capital cost. It's not a capital investment grant. It's a grant based on the amount of energy that you use. So you have a heat meter put in, and you'll get a payment over 15 years each quarter for the amount of heat that you use.
Okay.
I think if I just might on the cost, I forgot to say the carbon tax is an impact as well, of course.
Yeah.
Particularly for large installations, who maybe within the ETS, there's a saving there in relation to emissions. So that is quite important. But carbon tax, it has. We're very favorably exposed to the carbon tax in IrBEA, and it's an important instrument, but across all sectors. But as I say, for the larger scale, it's really about avoidance of emissions, that you don't include them in, because the emission from biomass is counted in the energy in the forest sector itself. So if you combust a ton of biomass, you don't account for it in that sector, in the energy sector. It's already accounted, and it will be double counting to account it again. And that's an important point. It's important in terms of the ETS size installations, that it's a saving in terms of carbon costs.
Okay. I think we're at the end. There's one final question here. What are the next steps for this Midlands Bioenergy Development Project? So I can take that one. So as you can see from probably the earlier slide in the document, our main deliverables were, number one, the energy demand and the feedstock reports, which we have now completed and will be published in the next week, and they're available. The next element was obviously information awareness campaign, all of that, and we've done a lot of events, and even this webinar is another example of that in terms of showcasing and giving out information about the sector and the region. And then the final element of the project was about the mentoring program, and we're coming to the end stages of that, in that a lot of businesses have been assisted. We've achieved our KPIs. So our next steps for this project is to write up our final report and conclude the project, but that doesn't necessarily stop us concluding our engagement. So if there are people on the call who are interested in setting up bioenergy based businesses, or indeed if you're interested in setting up or mobilizing biomass or bioenergy feedstocks, please get in touch. We can provide you with all the information, the work that has been completed so far, and help you and assist you. But for the purpose of this project, our next step is really to write our final report and conclude the formal elements of this project. So that summarizes kind of the next steps from our perspective. Just a few housekeeping issues. The recording of this webinar will be made available through our YouTube channel in the coming days also. As I said, the reports will be issued and available on our website in the coming week. I'd just like to say a few thank yous. First of all, thanks very much to Eugene and his colleagues, Henry and Tim, for their work on the feedstock analysis report. I'd like to acknowledge the work of Fichtner consultants, who did the energy demand report, and particularly to Kieran Miller, who led on that report for Fichtner, and indeed a number of his colleagues who were involved in the drafting of that report. I'd also like to thank Noel for his involvement today and also his work in mentoring the businesses or being involved in the mentoring program. I'd like to also acknowledge our colleague Stephen McCormick for his work in the program. He couldn't join us this morning for the webinar. I'd like to also acknowledge Pádraig O'Higgins, who initially was the project officer that started the work on this this project, and I know would have worked closely with Eugene and his co-authors and indeed Fichtner in terms of the development of these reports. So Pádraig left IrBEA for another role during the course of the project some time ago. So I'd like to just acknowledge the work of Pádraig during his time as a project officer at IrBEA for this project. And then I'd like to just finally acknowledge Teresa for her work in terms of setting up this webinar. And then in conclusion, just to thank the Department of Environment, Climate Action Communications for their granting of the project to IrBEA to roll out this and do this work over the last number of years, and particular to acknowledge the National Just Transition Fund, who provided the funding to make this project possible. I think there's learnings from this project which we will be able to use continually for the next period in terms of very clearly advocating to all stakeholders in the region about the potential of the region and the opportunities in the region from a bioenergy perspective. So I hope I haven't forgotten anyone in terms of thank yous. It's not my intention if I did, and I apologize, but I thank everyone that was involved. I finally just thank you all attendees for being with us this morning, and hopefully we can I see there's a few last questions in there as well. We'll save down the questions and maybe correspond with you individually on the questions. Just we don't have time to, because we're going over time to go into them now. So particularly to Binny and Tim, we come back to you maybe specifically bilaterally on your particular questions. We have them saved down there. So look, at that we'll conclude and close this morning's webinar. Thanks everyone for your attendance. Until the next time, have a good day and see you soon again. Bye-bye.